before we get into all the great work that Howie's been doing the last 3 days, let's bring our friend in, Merrill Reese, the legendary voice of the Philadelphia Eagles. Merrill, how you doing, my friend?
Can you hear me?
I got you, Merrill. How you doing, my friend?
Can you hear me?
I got you, Merrill. How you doing?
I'm great.
Merrill,
Great. Yes.
I want to start this off with you. We had on Jeff Fisher 2 days ago, and I asked him, before we get into the work that Howie's been doing the last couple of days, it's been remarkable and Hall of Fame-ish. I asked Jeff Fisher, who was the D coordinator of Gang Green, if Gang Green was a better defense than the 1985 Bears. He was on that 85 Bear team. He worked with Buddy on that team. And he worked, obviously, and was a coordinator, first DB coach, I think he was. Then he was the coordinator in Philadelphia for that Gang Green team. He picked the Gang Green defense as being a better defensive unit than the 1985 Chicago Bears. And I'm going to forward that to you right now, what you saw in 24 with this defense and what they did in the Super Bowl. Do you think that defense that you saw this past season is the greatest defense in Eagle history? Or is it still that group that was back in the late 90s and late 80s and early 90s?
I saw them all, and it's very, very difficult for me to evaluate, to take one defense against another defense. They were both great. The best defense, I guess, that I saw was Bud Carson's defense, where they were number one against the run, number one against the pass, number one overall, statistically. But players change, the games change, there's so much. Now, I can say that this Eagles team is the greatest team in modern Eagles history, from top to bottom. There's not a weak spot on the entire roster. This is the best team in modern history. I don't go back to the 40s or to the 1960s because it's unfair. You're talking about people of different sizes. You're talking about a game that's totally different. So I'd say in modern history, this is the best Eagles team. As far as those defenses are concerned, they were great. They were great. But this one was also great. It was a great defense. So it's, Vic Fangio has done an amazing job. Jeff Fisher was a great coach. Bud Carson, a great coach. Buddy Ryan, a great defensive coach. You talk about Jim Johnson, a great defensive coach. So you're talking about greatness, but being able to say that one was better or this one was better, I couldn't do it.
Do you think the bringing back of Zach Baun, and would you say this, that Zach Baun probably put the best season together that you've seen since Seth Joyner, that you've seen anybody play? Trotter was great, obviously. You've had guys in that linebacker position over the last 28 years or what have you. But I got to say, Merrill, his impact on that team, and not only his impact on the team, but the impact on the results of the wins. That's why he got that new contract, Merrill, is because, even though it's a one-year issue with him and you're not sure if it's going to be a Bradbury kind of deal. Remember, the thing with Bradbury, Merrill, he had a Pro Bowl all-pro season. Then you gave him a 3-year deal and he fell off the planet. Obviously, and I'm with you, I don't feel that way here either. I think he's going to be a really good ball player. I don't know if he'll have the same kind of year, but his impact has been immense. And just, again, your takeaway and him being brought back and his impact on the team that he had this past season and moving forward.
Enormous impact. A great guy, by the way. Just a great guy off the field, as down to earth and as nice to everybody as anybody you ever wanted to be around. He's terrific. But I would also add another name to that success. And I think I know that Zach would add the same name, and that is Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio was the one who said, hey, this isn't an edge rusher. He could be, but this guy is going to fit as a linebacker, as an inside linebacker. And he placed them there, and he did such a magnificent job of constructing this entire defense. It's right up there with the best I've seen.
How about this, too? And I don't think a guy gets enough plug for what he did for Zach Baun and the Kobe Dean, is Bobby King. I mean, would you not agree, Merrill, that, maybe some of the missteps they had in 23, and you hear Nick talking about them all the time. We learned a lot from 23, what not to do in 24. And one of them was to get really high-level coaches that were going to teach younger players, because when you had Oren Burks, you needed a guy to step in. No drop-off, not a lot of drop-off. There was some, but not a lot. And then the year you had with Baun, the year you had with anybody they put in that linebacking core, you can go down a list of Clint Hurt, the secondary coach.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the best staffs that they have had, too. And that really is also a credit to Vic and with Howie and everybody, Nick, and all those guys for putting that good coaching staff together.
Yeah, they did a great job. There's no doubt about it. They did a really, really good job at every position.
They did, man. Hey, the Barkley extension, were you surprised? He had 2 years remaining on his deal.
I'm only surprised because I was thinking more in terms of the obvious free agents. You wanted to see them sign Zach Baun, and you want to see them, if they can, sign Milton Williams. But we don't. That's where I'm thinking. And then all of a sudden the Barkley thing came about, and I said, great. But I wasn't thinking about him because we weren't worrying about losing him, because he still has years on his contract. But I think it was a nice reward to say to him, you were the best back in football this year. We appreciate you.
How about this too, Merrill? Do you not agree, covering the teams for all these years and the league for that matter, and me being a former player, this is what I say. Maybe you agree or you disagree here with it. If I'm sitting in another city, or I'm a potential free agent coming up March 12th in 6 days, and I'm watching what Roseman's doing, and I'm saying, well, wait a minute here. You're telling me that owner is going to give me a bag of money if I walk in there and produce? It hasn't Howie now made it for potential free agents to want to come and play? Maybe they take a couple million haircut because they want to come in on a 1-year deal, because they know they're going to turn around and they're going to reward the player like they did with Baun and Barkley. Isn't it ironic? The two guys on each side of the football, not dismissing Carter, but the two guys that were brand new to the team that made the biggest impacts that were new to the team were first-year Barkley and first-year Baun, and they were rewarded. Wouldn't you as a free agent go, I want to be part of that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it starts with Jeffrey, who is a wonderful, wonderful owner, Jeffrey Lurie. I had a coach one time say to me, an assistant coach who was leaving to go to another job, he said, if I ever get a head coaching job, I only hope that I get an owner like Jeffrey Lurie, because all he says to the coaches, yes, you want this? Yes. I mean, he doesn't get involved in the X's and O's. He's not hopping down on the sideline before the game is over, telling his coach what to do or not to do. So he's a great owner, and Howie is certainly a great general manager.
Help me out here, Merrill. The first 15 years owning the team, and then the last 15 years owning the team. How is Jeffrey Lurie different in how he's managed that? Because you had Andy Reid, you had Joe Banner, you had a bunch of really smart NFL people in the building. You had one of the best coaching staffs. I mean, Jim Schwartz and John Harbaugh and all these guys were part of that. What has made that owner better in the last 15 years versus the first 15 owning the team?
That's really tough to say. I mean, it's something that he built from the beginning. Jeffrey has always been a good guy, a guy that you want to work for, nice to everybody in the building. And he's hired the right people. And when he's made a mistake here and there, he's moved on quickly and given his coaches a good chance. He's never been one and done, but when he feels it's time to move on, they've moved on. So even with Andy was a great hire, because here's a guy who was not a coordinator, but a quarterback coach in Green Bay. And he when in the interviewing process, they just said, this guy has it, and they were right. They made the right decision. And Andy was great. But at the very, very end, There were a lot of things that happened to Andy's life from a personal standpoint, and the team got old and inefficient, and in certain areas, and it was the best thing that happened to Andy, and it was the right thing for the Eagles to say. 14 years is a long shelf life for any coach, and Andy picked it up in Kansas City and is a Hall of Fame coach. He's a Hall of Fame guy to begin with, but he's a Hall of Fame coach, one of the greatest ever, and I think the change was good for him, and it came at a time when the Eagles needed somebody new running the on the field team.
Let me then go over to Howie then. You know, I never really looked at Howie Roseman in the first. I mean, remember, Howie came from the cap side of the building, wasn't in personnel at the beginning when he first initially joined the Philadelphia Eagles in 2000. I mean, he came in on the financial side, and he came in when it was in the side of cap management, being a salary cap expert and all this and that. Then he evolved into what he has. But then again, he got removed even by that owner, and he had a reduced role. He goes and meets R.C. Slocum, the guy who ran the Spurs. He comes back, and he's been a completely different guy. Drafting, cap evaluating, these contracts, creating space. What has made him a better GM today than where he was? And I'm not saying he was, Merrill, I'm not saying he is clearly the last 4 years, though. There's 2 Super Bowls in 3 years here. The personnel is way better than it's ever been in the history of the franchise. Now, even on both sides of the ball. What's changed with him, in your opinion, since he was given that title of GM back?
Well, a couple of things. Number one, very early in his career, now he came in as kind of an intern with a law degree, and was very much at the right hand of Joe Banner in seeing how the cap works and everything else. He learned that, but very early he also moved to the personnel department in a minor role that just continued to grow. And like any of us, I hope if you're in something long enough, you get better at it. I think Nick Sirianni could tell you that he was a better coach this year than he was last year and the year before, and certainly in his first year. And you grow into these jobs, and if you're good enough, you excel. Howie obviously was smart enough and good enough. I mean, look, people talk about their own jobs, their own experiences. I feel, Dan, that I'm a much, much better broadcaster now than I was 48 years ago or even 10 years ago. I see more. When I look out of that booth, I see more things happening than I ever did before. I mean, my eyes haven't changed, my voice hasn't changed, but from being there and working at it, you reach higher levels. And I think Howie would be the first to say that he has learned more. I think he is more dependent on the advice of other people in the personnel department. He's got credibility around the league. He is a great deal manager, deal maker. I mean, I think other general managers are on guard when they're talking to Howie, because he is very convincing and he makes great deals. I mean, he's a very, very smart general manager. One of the best in the National Football League, if not the best.
Well, I think he's the best right now. And, I mean,
Dan, look at the last few drafts alone.
Yeah.
And how can you get Quinyon Mitchell and then Cooper DeJean back to back? How can you get somebody like Jordan Davis, or a couple of years ago, forget Jordan Davis, 2 years ago, when you get somebody like Jalen Carter, and then at the end of that round, you pick up Nolan Smith, who people were thinking is a bust. And then this year he came on very, very strongly.
Yeah, I meant R.C. Buford. You're right. Thank you very much. Somebody in the chat here. You bring up something that is so awesome here, that if you're a young player, Merrill, I try to tell people when you come into the NFL, or just like you were mentioning with your broadcasting career, You have these on. You don't have, and you have blinders on. You're here like this as an NFL guy. You don't have peripheral vision, which means you don't see things around you better when you're younger. You see them more like through a kaleidoscope, through a lens like this. But as you gain more experience, you have more vision for things that are around you. And as you mentioned, you're more in a comfort zone because when you're in the booth, you've gone through it, you've seen it, you've made your mistakes, you've made the corrections, you've expanded your career, you expanded your talents, you understand it just being around good people. So would you agree that that's kind of what we're going at here with what you're saying is that from the first time with Joe Banner as that intern, that I forget, I think it was Tannenbaum that recommended him from the Jets to be part of the organization. He kept hounding people, sending resumes in. Finally, the Eagles hired him as an intern. Oh, over all this time, it's kind of like just spread out now. He's more of aware of his surroundings in the league surroundings, and that's what's making him a better GM.
That, and you have a much greater frame of reference. You've learned from your mistakes. You've learned as much about what not to do as you've learned what to do. You've learned over the years, and all of us make mistakes. And it's those who take those mistakes and build from them that really succeed.
Wouldn't you agree that that's kind of what we're seeing here with Nick a little? Is that Nick is starting to see the field better. He's starting to be part of that process of how he's going through. And when you're surrounded by Vic Fangio and you're surrounded by Kellen Moore, who just got a job, I don't know about you. Like we just said all the time, Merrill, hey, you got Mike Quick in the building. Mike Quick's a great color analyst. It's easy to bounce somebody off something like that when you know his likes, his strengths, his weaknesses, which he doesn't have many. And he goes, if any, and you're sitting, you know everybody in the building. Don't you become better at not just being a broadcaster, but being a head coach because your surroundings, you're around talented people and you got talented people to coach.
I might have given you this quote before. I'm not somebody who likes to live in the past, but again, you talk about your frame of reference. So my frame of reference begins with Dick Vermeil. And Dick Vermeil said some of the most amazing things that continue to pop into my head at appropriate times. And one of the things that Dick Vermeil said was to be a successful head coach, you have to hire assistants who are good enough to take your job.
That's a great line. And it's funny, the great coaches, if you ever see them like Andy and the people that have been in Philly the last 5 years, look at the coaches that they've put into the NFL. Every coach that Jimmy Johnson had ended up going on and becoming a head coach. North Turner, Butch Davis, Dave Wannstedt. I'm not talking about their successes, but every guy they had went on to become a coach at one time or another. So if you have to surround yourself with talented people all the time and the structure of what the Eagles have done, I mean, I made this point to you before, since 2000, the Eagles haven't hired one coach, including Chip, who had a horrible bedside manner, who, by the way, is now the offensive coordinator again with the Raiders. Okay? I mean, so he's talented. He just doesn't have good bedside manner. But all talented people that they've hired, they land on talent. Now, what that talent does when they get in the building, that's up to them. I mean, you're either going to be a head coach somewhere or you're going to be shown the door in Philly. That's a tough spot to be in because look at the coaches who you've had. Either you're a head coach or you're showing the door. I like that pressure, actually.
Well, isn't it amazing, Dan, that Nick has only been here 4 years and his tree has already produced 3 head coaches. Shane Steichen, Jonathan Gannon, and now, of course, the latest. We go with the way things have gone. It's absolutely amazing. So Kellen Moore, you knew was going to be a head coach, and he comes off this tree. So when a coach can have a tree in 4 years that produces 3 head coaches, you know he's doing something right.
Are you concerned about Kevin Petula never having called a play ever?
Not at all. Not at all. I know Kevin Petula very, very well, and he's extremely, extremely bright. He has been the passing game coordinator, so he has fed into that game plan, and he is very, very sharp. He'll do a great job. I think that's a great hire to have somebody like that and recognize that he's better than anybody you could have brought in. He's a great hire.
Couple last questions here. Merrill, in your opinion, with the contracts that were signed now, who had the biggest impact on that football team last year, Zach Baun or Barkley?
Barkley. I mean, Zach Baun had a great impact. There's no doubt. But Saquon Barkley completely, totally changed the offense. Completely. I mean, he put together the greatest rushing season, including playoffs, of anybody in history. Zach Baun was excellent. First team All-Pro. But what Saquon Barkley did to this team, I think Saquon Barkley, Dan, let's face it, if it weren't a quarterback game, Saquon Barkley should have been the MVP of this whole league. It should have been. It was amazing.
All right, final question for you. What was the better parade, 17 or this past year?
Well, I got closer in 18 technically to getting hit in the head with a can of beer, and this time it missed me by five feet, sort of over my head. But there was one that unfortunately clocked Howie in the forehead. So, but from my standpoint, I survived this one better. They were equally cold. I think the fans were better at this one. I mean, the fans were less nuts, more. They were more under control. I think they appreciated this team. They gave them their just praise and adulation. But I thought they were more under control. I thought this was a great parade.
Merrill, you have to start telling Philly fans, don't you? This is not normal here. I mean, you had from 1960 until 1980, where you hadn't won a Super Bowl. You didn't win that one. You should have won it because it was a wild card team. Then you go to 2004, and, you're like, people are like, Eagle football, look at us now. And you're like, wait a minute here. It's like, this is not normal. Like, if you're 25 years old, all you know is Super Bowls and winning. If you're 40 years old or 45, you're like, holy cow, look where we are. And if you're 50, you're like, I can't believe where we are today. I mean, it's you're being spoiled right now in a way. It's like a spoiled decade right now for Eagle fans. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm going to tell you something. When people come up to me and they say, boy, they're going to come right back and win it again next year, I say, enjoy this year. My final words on the broadcast were, savor it and rejoice. And I mean that because every year is different. You never know. The team may lose a couple of free agents. They may gain some others. There are changes on the coaching staff, although not in any large scale. But every year is different. We can't sit here today on March the 6th and say who's going to get hurt next year. I've always said, if you take any team, and this team was 14-3 during the regular season, and you lose the wrong 3 or 4 people, wrong part of the season, that 14-3 could be 9-8. You just don't know. You just don't know. So enjoy it. I can tell you this. When I look at this roster, this ought to be a team that can compete for a Lombardi trophy for the foreseeable future, for the next several years. And then we'll see what happens. Ought to be right there to compete. But to say, well, they're going to come right back and win it next year. Just enjoy this year, and then let's watch next year as it unfurls.
I want to sneak one in on you. 30-second pick. If they don't move, what would you do there with that? And by the way, would you trade for Myles Garrett? Would you stick to the program that you have now? You won a Super Bowl without him. You won the Super Bowl without Myles Garrett. I know the Eagles are one of the favorites to land him, but they need an edge rusher. I think you're losing Josh Sweat, probably Milton too. There's reports that Minnesota and New England are going to make him a $80 million plus offer like we saw with the D tackle in Dallas. And then same with Sweat. Supposedly Arizona's going to offer him north of $89 million. So, I mean, do you go edge there, or do you try to make that trade with Miles? What would you do there, Merrill? Would you stand pat, draft, or would you try to upgrade and go after the guy and make you almost invincible?
I wouldn't take yourself out of the ability to make moves. I wouldn't pay it to the point where it's going to hamper you in other regards. And as far as that 32nd pick is concerned, I wouldn't be adverse if they move off of that. I mean, they did that a couple, what was it, 7 or 8 years ago when they moved back a few picks and ended up with Dallas Goddard, rather than choosing at 32. But if there's a player that slides to 32 and you say, boy, we had him at 19 or we had him at 22 and we could really use him. See, one of the areas, when I look at the areas, the Eagles are fortunate because to me, I don't think there's a quarterback out there this year. Not
No.
that the Eagles are quarterback, but I don't think there's a quarterback out there who are as good as the first 4 or 5 taken last year.
Yeah.
But if you look at the Eagles' needs, we're talking about interior defensive linemen. We're talking about if they lose a couple of those people, and this draft is just packed with outstanding defensive tackles. And I think you always have to be prepared to pick another offensive lineman. That's if you can get a top offensive lineman, somebody you really project to be a starter one day, you might have to go in that direction. And then there's always an edge rusher. So it all depends when that 32 arrives, who's gone or who's out there. If there's nobody you're in love with, then maybe you trade back half a round for somebody for several picks that can help you. And Howie's very, very good at that. He's very, very good at that. He picked Jalen Hurts deep into the second round. And look at him right now, the Super Bowl MVP.
This here, Merrill, I suggested that a couple days ago. I said, listen, if I'm at 32 and I don't see anything there I like, I mean, some of those top defensive tackles that you're talking about have been gone or they slide down. I'm with you because I think there's probably going to be 3 quarterbacks taken, and none of them outside of Cam Ward are first-round picks, in my opinion. I think they're most of talent-wise, they're like 3, 4, 5, but they're going to go high because it's the quarterback position. Yeah. But I suggested this, Merrill, trade out of 32, trade it to New England, trade it to Cleveland, trade it to the Giants, trade it to anybody who most likely will not have a good year this coming season. And Merrill, guess what? You could get a first-round pick next year. That thing could be in the top 10 picks. And if you win the Super Bowl, you'll have a 32nd pick. You might have the last pick in the draft and the first pick in the draft next year if you went that route.
You're right. It'll be interesting. But look, I'm still enjoying 2024 and the first few weeks of 2025 before I get into worrying about 2026.
I love it, Merrill. Merrill, you're going to have to show me that ring when you get it. You showed me the consolation ring, and I don't think you were really happy showing me the 22 ring, the NFC title ring when you got it. But I want to see that Super Bowl ring when you get it because I have that on my Facebook. You showing that, and your face is like this.
Well, I have 5 rings now, and
excuse me.
No, I'm getting my 5th ring. I have 4 rings now, and 2 of them are NFC championships. And this will be, or 3 of them are NFC championships, 1980, 2004. And of course, the other one was last year, but now I'll be getting my 2nd Super Bowl ring. So that's great. But you know what? The rings are great, but the feeling of being there as the seconds tick down and seeing them run down to 0 and realizing that this team that went through some trials and tribulations early in the season, got it together, and was truly the best NFL team, best team in the world for the 2024 season and a piece of 25. They're the best football team in the world right now, and that's all the satisfaction I need.
Will you promise me one thing? I want you to give me a Brady. I want you to give me a Brady photo I want you to go like this with all 5 of them on, okay? And I might even put that as my Twitter my Twitter, Facebook, or whatever picture. You with those 5 rings on your hand. I want a Brady shot of that.
I'll find a way to do it.
Thank you so much, Merrill. I appreciate it. You enjoy the continuous parade that's going on until the start of training camp, I guess. And OTAs here. We coming up on the draft in April here too, and we got 6 days of free agency too, and then September obviously starts the season again, and then July 27th will start training camp.
I'm just looking forward to the warm weather of May when I can get out on the golf course. I have a brand new knee that I got 2 weeks ago, and I feel great. And I'm ready. I'm not ready for golf yet, but I will be in May.
Holy cow. So Merrill's going to be able to have a full follow through. Before you were probably slicing it right.
It's going to help. And you know what? I gave my new knee a name.
What is it?
Saquon. I'll be moving better than ever.
Holy cow. Merrill Reese, are you kidding me? He's got 20 extra yards on his drive now. What happened? He has the Barkley knee.
That's
Merrill, thank you, my friend.
Take care and have a great day.
You got it. That's my friend Merrill Reese, the legendary voice of the Philadelphia Eagles. Make sure you guys hit that like button. Very cool. We'll have Zander Krause on with us at 4:30, and we will have Angelo Cataldi on with us at 5:30. Please hit the like button. Holy cow. I've got the Barkley knee. I love that guy. Yeah, I'm getting that picture. By the way, as you can see, I don't quite have a Baldinger finger there, but it's pretty close. See what I did here? I taped them wrong. I taped it this way. It should have went this way. But as you can see, this thing's here at 2 o'clock, that one finger. Look at it. That one. Yeah, that thing's not aimed in the right direction. I don't think this one is either over here. See the pinky? The pinky's broken. I shattered it. Yeah, not good. Yeah, not working. Hey, hit the like button there. Don't forget my good friends at Morgan & Morgan, the #1 injury law firm in America, folks. I talked about John Morgan and Ultima Morgan, his wife. They built this franchise 25 years ago, and it is the #1 law firm when it comes to injury law firms in America. And their track record speaks for itself with over $20 billion recovered for clients. Morgan & Morgan's track record is second to none. They are the #1 recovery law firm in the country. Pennsylvania, I told you about the case. $650K, an insurance company came in. They wanted to settle with $650. They were threatening the people in PA. They called Morgan & Morgan and said, no way. John Morgan and his team of thousands went in, and they ended up getting that family $26 million in recovery. There was a family in Florida, same scenario, $350K. Insurance company didn't want to budge. Morgan & Morgan goes to work. They ended up getting $12 million for that family. Life is tough, man. We tell you this all the time. Decisions that you make could really be detrimental or prosperous for your families. Choosing Morgan & Morgan is the easiest thing that you'll do. If you're ever injured, please do me a favor. Make sure you check out my friends. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/big sales or pound law 529. That's FOR, thepeople.com/big sales or pound law 529. And do me a favor, tell them Big Sills sent you.
This is Eric. When he got injured,